take up your space there. I haven't cleaned up my mailbox before it overran.
No, so Glenn left that meeting anyway.
Yeah.
Is he going to be on the phone or there?
He said that he could be conferenced in if necessary. He was going to hand it over to me to give it a shot.
Okay. I did turn everything on.
It's live.
We're in session. Please stand for the pledge to the flag, and then move your hats. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Counselor Kane?
Here.
Counselor Fellows?
Here.
Counselor Keller?
Here.
Counselor LaRochelle?
Here.
Counselor Lunt?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Counselor Robichaud?
Here. Next item.
First item is good news and recognition.
Is there any good news? Or
Yes.
recognition? Lisa.
There is. We have been accepting applications for absentee ballots. We finished checking in the last of the ballots today. So we'll start sending those out before the end of this week. We're getting them all prepared and enveloped and labeled and everything. So people will be able to get those, and they'll be able to, starting Friday at the latest, but hopefully maybe even Thursday, we'll be able to do early voting right here at the town office during our regular business hours.
Good news.
Nice. So the ballots are complete?
Yes, we got, so we have to make sure that we have both the state ballots and the town ballots. We have them all, and we just, so part of the process includes making sure everything gets online and all the links are there for people to look up information, and so it's going very smoothly in that technical sense.
Who do we have running for Councilman LaRochelle's seat?
Well, in addition to Councilor LaRochelle, we also have Mr. Scott Guyson, who's run for other offices locally before.
Yes.
We have a candidates night next council meeting, the 17th, and that will be an opportunity for people to meet the candidates and hear the answers to some questions they might have. We'll have some prepared questions, and we'll also accept some questions from the audience. And then if we still have time, and I think we should, we also want to be able to give folks a little bit of a synopsis about the two questions on our referendum ballot, the bond ordinance for the Borough Road Bridge and the charter amendment for school elections being moved to June. So
What time is the meet the candidates?
it'll be right before the council meeting, so it'll start at 6 p.m.
6 o'clock.
We have flyers up here at the town office, and I'm going to drop some off for the library and the rec department.
Are they doing other boards as well, or just council?
It'll be council. Well, we want people to meet the candidates too. So there'll be a school committee, and there's a person running for a school committee seat, and then also water commission.
Okay. Very good. Anything else? Next item.
Next item is public hearings. The first public hearing is medical manufacturing facility renewal for 207 Edibles. And that business has turned in their paperwork and their payment, and they've had all their inspections, passed all their inspections.
Okay. I'll open that public hearing. Anybody here to speak regarding 207 Edibles? Seeing none, I'll close that public hearing. Next hearing.
The next hearing is an itinerant vendor and victualer's license for 2 food trucks, Bolicious and Queenie's Vending.
I'll open that public hearing. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll close that public hearing.
The next hearing is for adult use marijuana manufacturing license for River Driver Cannabis Company. This is a new license, not a renewal. And again, all the paperwork's been turned in. The license is paid for, and all of the permit inspections have been done.
I'll open that public hearing. Anybody wish to speak? There being none, I'll close that public hearing.
Next is the hearing for amendments to Chapter 14, General Assistance Maximums and Appendices.
I'll open that public hearing. Anybody wish to speak to that topic? Seeing none, I'll close that public hearing.
The next item is audience participation and response for agenda items. At this time, those in the audience who wish to speak may approach the lectern. Please use the microphone and state your name for the record. This portion of the agenda is solely to address items that are on today's agenda.
Anybody in the audience wish to speak to any of the agenda items? Seeing none, next item.
Next item is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered routine and will be considered for adoption by one motion with no separate discussion unless a councillor requests an item be removed. Any councillor wishing to remove an item may do so now. Okay. Order 2023-183 to approve municipal accounts payable warrants, $474,903.34. Municipal payroll warrants, $219,399.35. School accounts payable, $251,399.35. That's not right. I apologize. Just give me a second here. Can't find the sheet. Sorry about that. I'm going to get the payroll warrant sheet from right here.
Okay.
Okay. Can you look that up for me? And if you go to the portal, nope, go to the lisbonme.org. It's in your packet. If you go to the municipal payroll warrants, the warrant sheet, it's the one that's all in color. Go to lisbonme.org and on yours, and then we'll go meetings and agendas. There you go. That's what I need. So the municipal payroll warrants are $271,460.25. The school accounts payable is $778,322.26. And the school payroll warrants are $408,436.80. Next, the minutes of September 5th, 2023. Medical manufacturing facility renewal for 207 Edibles, the itinerant vendor and victualler licenses for Bolicious and Queenie's Vending, an adult use marijuana manufacturing license for River Driver Cannabis Company, and to set a public hearing for Auntie D's Food Truck for October 17, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Order passed, vote 7-0.
Next item.
Council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order 2023-184 is for compliance with LD 2003. This is a first reading and a roll call vote will be required. Yes.
Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Birch from North Star Planning, the town's contract planner. I think you may have actually gotten my planning board memo instead of a council memo that kind of summarized some more of this. But I will quickly explain what this is all about, and then if you have any questions, we can follow up with an updated memo and some of the maps or zoning maps if you need to see some things. LD 2003, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is a new state law that impacts housing density and accessory dwelling units and affordable housing. This was passed, I don't know, a year or two ago at this point. It's been in rulemaking for a while. And basically every town in Maine has to change their ordinances to comply with LD 2003. And Lisbon, because you have a council, you have to comply by January 1st, 2024. So we've been working with the planning board since August, and they went through reviewing these changes and holding a public hearing at their meetings in September. So now it is your turn. So I will just really quickly go through the three things that LD 2003 affects in Lisbon, and I'm happy to take any questions during this or after, whatever's easier. So the first part of LD 2003 is an affordable housing density bonus, and this is being set by the state. So this is just basically, this will now go into effect once the law goes into effect in 2024. And what this allows is that you get an automatic density bonus of 2.5 times the base zoning. So basically 2.5 times the amount of units you would normally be allowed to build on a parcel if you meet the definition of affordable housing in this law, which is affordable to households whose income does not exceed 80% of median income for rentals. And so they have to be affordable, and they have to be in an area that is either a designated growth area in a comprehensive plan or is served by sewer or water. This will usually mean public sewer or water, especially in a place like Lisbon, but technically someone could have an advanced wastewater system that would count as a sewer system by this ordinance. So this is coming down from the state. You will now be allowed to do this. So there is one ordinance change that we're recommending in regards to this, and that is simply to add a reference to this state law in section 7535, the bulk and space standards, which is, I think it's redlined in the memo, to say that multifamily development designated as affordable housing according to the requirements of this law is eligible for a density bonus of 2.5 times the base density. A little complicated to explain, but in, sort of it happening is not actually that complicated. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Should we keep going? Mm-hmm. The next part is accessory dwelling units. So these are, like your granny flat, your in-law apartment. It can be attached or detached from a single family home or duplex, usually is how you see them. So LD 2003 is requiring that accessory dwelling units are now allowed in any zone where housing is allowed. So Lisbon has actually had accessory dwelling units as a conditional use. So that's going to go away. You can't have that anymore anywhere where housing is allowed. So in most zones in Lisbon, ADUs will now just be a permitted use, which means they'll just go through MARC, through the code officer. They will no longer have to go to planning board. They will remain conditional in zones where housing is conditional, so in the resource protection zone and the diversified development zone. There are two other small changes that we recommend in regard to this. There's also been a couple additions to the language in here to just clarify what zones it's now conditional in, and to correspond to the state definition saying that an ADU can be within an existing home or attached to it or in a new structure on the property. There are two things that we are striking from the existing ADU ordinance, and one is the minimum parking requirement. State law does not allow you to have minimum parking requirements for ADUs anymore, so that has to go. And then the second thing that we are striking is the provision that either the principal dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit must be occupied by the owner of the property. This is not actually something that LD 2003 requires, but this is actually, in our experience and in discussion with the code officer, this is basically unenforceable. There's not really a good way to prove that someone is actually living in either the primary residence or the ADU. So while we're updating this ordinance, I think it makes sense to take it out. The planning board was in agreement on that. So that's the ADUs. If anyone has any questions.
So, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yeah.
So you said that was a state requirement, or was that a local requirement? The idea of that the owner of the property. So basically, it's it's basically set up so if you have an in-law or family member that they can actually build on your property, right? I mean that's the intent of it. I assume what they're trying to do by that is not have someone in a very dense area build a second unit out back to rent and rent both spots, to actually take advantage of the scenario, what the state is trying to actually give a benefit for people to add to their living ability of their family members, right? I mean, it'd be curious to see how many places that would actually truly affect in a sense. I mean, I'm thinking of Houston Park, the size of the lots, the size of the buildings with the setbacks and everything. I mean, I'm not sure, is there a minimum or maximum space on a accessory dwelling?
Yeah, so I think something that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that everything, no matter what's changing with LD 2003, everything is still going to be subject to all the other zoning ordinances. So minimum lot size, shoreland, water and wastewater setbacks, all those things still apply. So if you don't have the space on your lot, you still don't have the space on your lot. It's just allowing ADUs in all zones. And Lisbon, it's a local ordinance thing that Lisbon has saying that it has to, either the principal or the accessory unit has to be owner occupied. You do see that in some towns, either owner occupied or family occupied. The issue with that is really just that it's very difficult to enforce, you know, especially if you're not requiring people to register their accessory dwelling units, you know, you're not having the code officer go out every year and ask who's living there. It's, you know, it's the kind of thing that I understand the intention of, but again, it's just pretty impossible to enforce.
Hard to enforce, understand. Yep.
And I think, like, if you were running into problems with rental units, you know, requiring rental units to register and having some kind of annual system is probably the best way to go about it, rather than singling out accessory dwelling units.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
that particular matter, although it was discussed at the planning board this time, was quite a matter of discussion when I was on the planning board and we passed the ADU ordinance. Owner occupied was seen then as a safety measure to keep it local, but we also realized that never in the world was it ever enforced. It's very difficult, and so why have it there? If we have things like Airbnb issues that other towns have had, we don't seem to have that problem, and when we do, it can be addressed in a different manner.
Yep. Any other questions about ADUs? No? Okay, so the biggest part of LD 2003 that you might have heard people talking about, or that towns have gotten a little upset about, is that this is now, that LD 2003 is setting a minimum base housing density for anywhere considered a growth area of 4 dwelling units. So if you have an empty lot on sewer and water in a growth area in town and you have the lot size, you can now build 4 units on it. If you have a lot in a growth area, which is typically going to have water and sewer, and it already has a house on it, you can now build 2 additional dwelling units on it. So that's the new base density that the state is setting. I have some maps that I don't think I can pull up, but basically, and then in a rural area, sorry, I should have said this first. In a rural area, so not the growth areas in town, but in the rural areas, the base density is now going to be 2 dwelling units if a lot is empty. So you'll be able to build a duplex in a rural area, basically. Now, this is based on the town's future land use map in your comprehensive plan, where you set by state statute growth areas and rural areas. So what this means in Lisbon is that the village zone, general residential zone, and limited residential zone, LR, are now going to have to allow a base density of 4 units on an empty parcel, if they have the lot size and all the other things are in place. And then everywhere else in town and all the other zones, they have that base density of 2 dwelling units. Does that make sense to everyone? It can be a little complicated to explain.
And you had to redraw the
Yep.
map a little bit, which I understand that's going to be accompanying this soon.
Yes. So I will make sure everyone gets a copy of that.
Was the general residential, did that encroach on the ROS2 in the Lisbon Village growth zone, or was that already there?
Yeah, so I think what happened, so...
Because you can't change that just because you want to, right? Doesn't that have to be
So let me finish the land use edits we're going to make, and then I'll go to the map. Does that work?
Sure.
So there's just to finish going through it, there are some tables in that memo that show basically where we need to make a few small changes. It's that 2-family dwellings will now be conditionally allowed along with single-family dwellings in the resource protection zone, and then in the limited residential, you will now be allowed to build up to 4 units or more with a conditional use permit. And then the sort of asterisk is you can also go above those 4 units if you meet those affordable housing bonus requirements we talked about before. And then there's also the dimensional table, which just is based off of the zoning that's already in place, but just split out per dwelling unit instead of for single family and duplex, now that you will be allowed to have more than 2 units. So yeah, the mapping in there, basically Lisbon's future land use map from the comp plan, like many towns, has kind of basic boundaries. They're not quite done to the zoning lines. This is how a lot of places do it. And it was a surprise to everyone when the state said that's now your zoning map for LD 2003. So there is that area that you're talking about where general residential abuts ROS 1 or 2? 2. So we've been talking to the state, and basically they recommended that we clarify that boundary with basically the zoning boundary as it is, and then clarify any other boundaries in the map where there was sort of blank space between them. And I have these on my computer. I don't know if I can just show them to people, but we can, or the best way
We
to-
have them in our notes.
Do you have them?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have like big ones that I don't know if they're in the memo that you got.
No.
No, I didn't get them soon enough.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, if you wanted to.
What we have is the ones that you trimmed along the property lines.
yeah. So I was going to show everyone what we've sort of, that down.
Didn't work last time.
No, it didn't work last time. So.
either way, for the public hearing part of it, doesn't sound like we have an option. It's basically is what's happening, so regardless where they are, it's kind of
Well,
what they,
this is just a rewrite to make it comply with.
yeah.
But this is all coming down from the state, right? The state's
Exactly.
saying-
Yeah, I
State
mean,
law.
yeah.
This is the first hearing, the first reading, and we'll set the hearing for the next meeting. So I can make sure that we get these maps to council before the next meeting. And also, we should have some paper copies then too, because the technical issues we've been having aren't the first ones we've had today. So we weren't able to print those.
Okay.
So basically no one's zoning is going to change. This is clarifying where those growth areas are on the map, so they better correspond to the zones and they don't jump into any of those rural zones. And we have been working with the state, so we will have to submit this as a comprehensive plan amendment, but it does not have to go through the full comprehensive plan process. It's considered administrative. So what that means is that once you can see the new map, if council votes to move forward with it, we just need to submit this new map with the 2019 plan and a form that's signed by the planning board chair and the council chair.
So do the property owners in RS2 that seem to have been taken over by the general residential that you circled here, are they made aware that their zoning is changing?
Their zoning isn't changing.
It's not
so
changing.
the future land use map, just that boundary is kind of jagged, and the future land use map and the comp plan just simplified it to a little triangle. So no zoning has changed. If anyone and basically there was no reason why anyone would really be diving into that now. But with LD 2003, what could happen is someone who lives right on the other side of in ROS2, right on the other side, could say, well, by your future land use map, I'm technically in that triangle, and therefore I'm in a growth area. Mm-hmm. So the point of this is really just to clarify that boundary in the full detail that it has with the zoning map.
Because part of that, where that circle is, there was a house that put 2 duplexes in, didn't they?
Yeah.
Right on Grandview.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Grandview?
I think that would still be in the growth area because it's right in that triangle between the two
Yeah, it
roads
is.
there. So I think even with the change,
You're talking about Grandview?
Yeah.
yeah, it would be right in that triangle there, that part that's not changing where it's, because it was in general residential when they did that. That's why they could do it.
Yeah, and the water and sewer line does really end at that boundary. So the people in general residential have water and sewer, and then right over at that, where you're saying Grandview Street, on the other side of that, where it's ROS2, they'd no longer have utilities. So no zoning is changing. This is really just a clarification because once LD 2003 goes into effect, people could approach the code officer saying I should be allowed to have more units, I'm in a growth area, and we want to make sure that we don't have any issues with that.
Okay.
So growth areas have the requirements to be a lot more precise now than they ever were.
Yeah, I think that's something that the best answer we got from the state is that they'll continue to address it in rulemaking as this goes into effect. But I think the impact of this is going to be that those future land use maps and comprehensive plans are now much more closely tied to zoning instead of being more of like a general idea for people to refine later as they implement the comp plan.
Yeah, I think it's pretty rotten on the part of the state to take a map that was never intended for that and just redo it into something else without asking us and without involving the towns. I think this whole law is a big, sledgehammer to towns, and I'm not supportive of it at all.
That's, frankly, that's what it was intended to be.
I know, and I think they went too far. They didn't just throw out the baby with the bathtub. They threw the dynamite in the bathtub.
Yes. Do they, Mr. Chair, may I? And again, maybe this is maybe it's more to fine print than it read, but I mean, in accessory dwellings, now that it could actually be a secondary and sometimes a third dwelling, is there provisions there for guidance as far as for communities, as far as like, water requirements? Now, does this need to have 3 individual water lines going to a property, or 2 separate sewer lines hooking in? Or, I think there's going to be a lot of a lot of questions coming up when it comes to permitting on how all that actually plays into effect, right?
Everything will still have to follow those, typically they're just the main state plumbing standards, so you have to show adequate sewer and water capacity for what you're building. And most of that is through, I think, the main state plumbing requirements.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, like, on if you have a totally separate dwelling that's rented, so to speak, if the water's actually tapped off the main, through the main house, right? Because if you actually, whether it's metered or it has to be a separate line and metered, I mean, I'd be curious to see how all that plays out, because we really haven't had that much background on that unless we actually had a subdivision, which was all required to be individual, versus the idea of someone building another house in their backyard, and now trying to figure out how you actually hook to town sewer and town water and actually have it all properly permitted and build. Yep.
That's probably a better question for the code officer than me, but I assume it would, you'd have to get the permission from the water district or show that you have the adequate capacity. And especially once we talk about some of those multi-unit buildings, even if you get that affordable housing density bonus, you're still going to have to show adequate water capacity. So at some point that will, involve certain size water mains, even sprinklers, things like that, depending on how many units you're talking about.
This whole ordinance was intended to address the housing shortage in Maine that we have, and I think the supposed hammer effect has something to do with some of the towns are very NIMBY conscious and don't want things like that in their town. So I think the legislature may have had a heavy hand in it, but that was the intent, to make it more equal.
Tiny homes for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing too is that in Lisbon, there's actually not that many things changing here. If you look at that ordinance, you'll be allowed 2 more dwelling units per parcel in limited residential if you have the lot area, and then just that accessory dwelling units will have a simpler permitting process. So in terms of, this isn't a huge change. Like, some towns are going to have to
If you
reckon
go to
with.
Cape Elizabeth, it's a different story.
You're probably not the person to ask that. We probably should ask our rep the impetus behind this, and I'm hearing the housing, and I wonder if it's because of the migrant issues that cities like Portland are having, where they're shuffling people around because they wanted to put them in the Ramada, right? But I think the city voted that down.
Right.
This has been in the works for a long time. Yeah, so they've been working on this for years. They tried to pass it back in 2019 or 2020, and then so it's been a long time coming.
I think it had more to do with the workforce than anything else.
There's similar, Massachusetts has similar, a lot of other states have similar laws, basically where they weren't seeing enough housing being built to meet workforce or population needs, so then the state comes down with a hammer and says, well, now you have to do it.
Oh, yeah, there's over 5 million have come into the country, so they got to go somewhere.
Right. Now, does this actually not override, but actually supersede some of our house loss requirements when it comes to actually doing a multi-dwelling? So if you have a property where you're going to do a 4-house subdivision, before that you used to have to go through a whole subdivision profile, right? So this bypass that, so you can actually do the 4 houses now without even going through the subdivision.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Great question. This is an issue. So Maine state law requires any basically 3 or more units to go through subdivision, which is obviously a problem if you're now saying that someone can build 4 units on their property. So there is some movement in the legislature to try and get that adjusted above 3, but as of right now, you are going to have to go through subdivision if you want to build that 4 unit on your single lot.
They really can't refuse it, right? Because it's actually state law saying you can.
You can, but you have to go through the subdivision process still.
Still, it'd be very hard to actually deny if it's actually state law saying you can, right? Even though if you have the size of the property and you have adequate utilities, it would, I don't know, it'd be
You'd
kind
have
of a
to go
challenge.
through the planning board. So if you were going to build a duplex on your property, you would not have to go through the planning board. You would just go to the code officer. If you're going to build 4 units on your property, you're going to have to go through planning board because that qualifies as subdivision by state law.
Which isn't that big a deal.
It isn't. It's just one of those things where they say, well, you can, but you still got to
Just like the used to be hotel downtown that is got to go through subdivision review.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Yep. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes, but yeah, we'll make sure you get those maps before the next one. Is that when the public hearing will be?
Yeah, the public hearing will be our next council meeting,
Okay,
October
great.
17th.
Great. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
Thanks. We ready to
We'll look for a motion.
vote?
Make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Voice vote?
A roll call vote. Councillor Kane?
Yes.
Councillor Fellows?
Yes.
Councillor Keller?
Yes.
Councillor LaRochelle?
Yes.
Councillor Lunt?
Yes.
Councillor Moore?
Yes.
Councillor Robichaud?
Yes.
7 yeas, 0 nays. Order passed, vote 7-0.
Next item?
Order 2023-185, Erosion and Sedimentation Control at Construction Sites Ordinance. This is a second reading.
I'll make the motion for discussion.
I'll second.
Don?
Well,
Yes.
I think the recommendation from staff is that we reject this, pending further adjustments to the wording, and I'm not sure what that adjustment is, but I believe that was Glenn's recommendation. And that's fine if we do that, but the way that this ordinance came about, it came out of Chapter 70, which is done by the planning board, originated in the planning board, and therefore it will turn it back to the planning board. And the planning board will need to see those adjustments and have another hearing and coming back here again. So it's, if it's necessary that we do that, that's the process that should be followed. And it has to be a 2/3 vote at least from ours to do that.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there any time frame on this? Is it time sensitive at all?
Yes. Supposed to be in effect January 1st, I believe. Isn't that right? I think it's January 1st.
I think
It's
that's
the same
right.
as the others. Yeah.
So that, this was supposed to be in front of council not too long ago. We had a couple other larger things going on, and due to a clerk's office error, it didn't get on the agenda properly. So we're doing it now, and now that we're looking at it again separately from those others, I think is where staff are seeing that there are some issues with the language, that the language in this ordinance was designed for another municipality, and it doesn't speak to the needs of Lisbon. So it would be tight to get it done before January 1st, but in my opinion, we can do it as long as we don't make any more errors in getting it on the
Still
agenda
have to do it
properly.
properly. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, so the planning board does the same process as the council. They have a first hearing and a first reading, and then a hearing and a second reading and a vote, and they can make changes along the way. So I think the recommendation is to have staff work with the planning board to get that language Lisbon-oriented so that it meets Lisbon's needs and doesn't put a burden on the code enforcement office, which is what it's doing right now, a huge burden.
Or wasn't this?
There's more notes from Glenn.
I'd like to read what the town manager offered. He's noting that we're already past the deadline, and at the last meeting, council requested that we look into recouping expenses related to the inspections, and we'll be submitting revisions to the fee schedule to recoup the code inspector's time. And this would not require an ordinance change, but we're recommending voting down the ordinance so that Stillwater Environmental can make revisions to allow for third-party inspections at the applicant's expense.
So that's what we got to do. And deadlines are deadlines, but you still have to do it right.
Well, it's not right now, so
Right.
Yeah.
we got to get it done
Why
right.
didn't we know this on the first reading?
I don't know why.
I think he did notice it on the first read,
We did.
which is why we're turning it around.
Actually, yes, Councilor Fellows, you're right. I do have in my notes that there were questions about it, and so the town manager was going to look into it, and that's where these,
Oh, now they're
these
coming
points came up, yes. I believe it was Counselor Lunt who brought up the question
Yes.
about the fee schedule.
So,
Yes.
so the recommendation from staff and from the planning board is to vote no
Planning
on
board
this?
That is,
hasn't-
the planning board doesn't have any input yet on that.
Yeah.
But the recommendation from staff is definitely, from both the code enforcement and the manager's office, was definitely to vote it down so we can make sure that it's done correctly for Lisbon.
We just need to get it back to the planning board.
What-
Yep.
when-
So is the motion on the floor actually to approve?
The motion
Yes.
on the floor is to approve. It's a roll call vote. We would need it to fail in order to send it back to the planning board.
Okay, sounds like that's what we need to do.
No, if we're ready, I'll move the question.
Aren't, okay, well, there's a motion to move.
Mhm.
Isn't it,
Motion.
you said the planning board's not involved in this? In your
No,
email?
I
to
said
me-
they were involved in the approval of the original.
Original.
That's how we got it to the town council. But they're not involved in any of this so
Till we
far.
get it, till we bring it
Till-
back.
Till we send it back to them.
So a no vote will send it back to them?
Right.
May I ask another question? If a lot of this has to do with the idea of scheduling and fee schedules and stuff, does the planning board actually set the fee schedules? Is that actually done through the administration, like town manager and?
It's approved by the planning board with staff recommendations usually, and that comes not only from like the manager's office, but also from code enforcement and research into what other towns have, and the same way we do other
For
schedules.
some reason, I don't think the planning board set fee
It's
schedules.
It's
the
not,
council, isn't it?
it's not the fee schedule itself, it's setting up the criteria for it.
Right.
Okay, so we got to set up the criteria for it, what's going to be charged, and then the town side will figure out how much those charges will be.
That's right.
I got you.
Is there a motion to move it, or are we just gonna
We-
wait to vote?
We have a motion on the floor and a second, so we're ready for a vote.
You need a roll call, right?
Yes. May I?
Yes, you may.
Counselor Kane?
No.
Counselor Fellows?
No.
Counselor Keller?
No.
Counselor LaRochelle?
No.
Counselor Lunt?
No.
Counselor Moore?
Nay.
Counselor Robichaud?
Nope.
0 yeas, 7 nays. Order failed. Vote 07.
So as a council, we won't see this back for another month or so.
Yeah.
It'll be in December, probably, possibly, by the time it
It'll
goes to the
take,
planning board.
yep, it takes a minimum of 2 planning board meetings, plus the time for that research to be done. So, yeah, it'll be tight to get it by the end of the year, but right now, there are, we did check to see there weren't any projects that this affects that are ongoing right now.
And just for clarification, there can be no adjustments on the council side of an ordinance that comes through from the planning board. So, I mean, we couldn't actually made adjustments and then voted them through without it going back to the planning board. I mean, that's where it's confusing for me a little bit, is the idea of, we want to make adjustments to it, but we can't make any without it going back to planning board to be reapproved
Yeah.
on that end. I mean, I
Mr.
thought,
Chair, we've had this discussion numerous times, back when I was on the planning board and you were a town
Correct.
council. I think we decided at that time, if it was grammatical or anything like that, just small changes, it didn't have to go back.
I thought.
But if it changed the intent in any manner, it went
Substance.
back.
Yeah, because this doesn't sound like it's changing the substance of it. It's basically more changing the idea of the fee schedule of what, it's not changing the idea that the erosion, the policy is changing. It's basically more the idea of how it gets paid for. I mean, that's what I see, but.
Did you have something more too?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the town manager is going to have the language done this week, and he's waiting on it from Stillwater. So you should be receiving that.
Perfect.
So it's moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's moving. Okay.
As long as if it gets back, if it gets on the planning board's agenda next time, which is soon, that'll help.
Yes.
Well, we would expect the planning board to fast track this so we can
Yeah.
get it done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next item.
Okay. Order 2023-186, CDBG project approval for 21 Main Street, the Main Street Laundry.
Is there someone in the audience who can speak to this?
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ross Cunningham, Economic Development Director for the Town of Lisbon. First and foremost, we are going to scratch the approval for 25 Main Street. We did some serious digging into sign sizing yesterday and realized that the request would put them over the limit, so we're pulling that request. So 25 Main Street's off the calendar. 21 Main Street is the laundromat. and they are applying for the CDBG grant to reface the front of the laundromat, revise the old neon sign, and do some other really nice stuff to that. The max we can give them is $20,000, and they've asked for more than that, so they're going to get $20,000 from us, and I think the whole project is 27 and change, 26.66, I think. But we are now doing 75% of the project with the new standards that we changed several months ago. So, just approving this for the next step forward.
Okay.
Any questions for me?
So are you withdrawing D, the next item?
So, yeah, we can do that when we get to the next item on the agenda, but for,
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
so for this one, for 21 Main Street, we just want to, let's see, a motion to approve CDBG funding for Main Street Laundry in the amount of $20,000 to upgrade, for upgrades to the facade and windows.
Make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Who owns that now? Driscoll still own?
Chris Jackson of
Yep.
Tangles.
She is going to keep the neon sign there, right?
Hoping so, that's our
'Cause
goal.
that is actually
It's a beautiful old sign, she's
yeah,
hoping
exactly.
to revamp
Yep.
it. and
That
keep
is
it.
actually awesome.
Any
We put
other
that as a
discussion?
requirement. No, sorry.
The John's TV sign was the good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one, too.
Any more discussion? We're ready to vote?
Just a regular
All in
vote.
favor?
Order passed, vote 7-0.
Next item.
The next item is removed from the agenda at the request of the Economic Development Director with the approval of the chair.
Thank you. Next item.
Order 2023-188 to authorize the town manager to approve applications for catered functions. So the town manager asked me to speak to this because I was directly working on it. It sounds more complicated than it is. Right now, our ordinances say that the town council has to sign every single request for a caterer to come to Lisbon for work. So, for instance, a business or residents who want to have a celebration of some sort at their home or in a public space, and they want to have someone come cater it, the council has to sign, and that's at the mercy of the council meetings and schedule. And sometimes, due to liquor licensing, that is, it becomes impossible, and we did have to deny a request. Not deny it, but we weren't able to process it. And so what we'd like to do is make it possible for those businesses to be able to work in in Lisbon. I don't know why I said that. So it would make it possible by giving the town manager the council's permission to sign. The state allows that. So the state application specifically states that it has to be either the board or someone who's designated by the board. But we are, when I checked with our attorneys, we did not have a designee. So we need a designee so that we can make sure that businesses can keep coming to Lisbon.
So there's an ordinance that specifies that?
It's part of our, there isn't an ordinance that specifies it. What there is not is an order that allows a designee. So right now, so the default is that the council has to approve because we don't say otherwise. So we have to, the council has to approve that a designee can make that, give that signature. And we do that on some other things. It's on the tip of my tongue, but there are one or two other things that we allow the police chief, the town manager. Or
Okay,
the
so
town
there's
clerk to
nothing
sign.
specific in the ordinance that says,
Nothing
I mean, we're not trying to override an ordinance with an
No,
order,
we're not.
right?
Nope, this is brand new.
Because I'll sign the executive order if you need it.
There you go.
It just allows us
I
discretion.
have a pen and a cell phone. so-
Yeah. And it would still allow, so if the town manager looked at an application and felt that it needed to come to council for any reason, it still allows that to come to council if there's any reason that it needs to be considered by council.
I think the less red tape we have, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Makes
that's
sense,
is in the realm of a town manager's responsibility. I don't think it should have to be coming to us to approve a caterer.
Make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
There we go.
All in favor?
Order pass, vote 7-0.
Should be the assistant town manager, though.
So the way if you look at the notes, it's actually a long, that's why I said it seemed more confusing than it was, but to designate the town manager and allow the town manager in their absence to designate the assistant town manager or another designee for that.
So you may not be able to.
It could be you.
There we go.
Very good. Next item.
Other business, and the first is council committee reports.
School committee.
I was not able to get to yesterday's meeting.
Planning board.
The only thing I have is that our planner was working on the final revisions for the future land use map. Other than that, not much.
LDC.
I was not able to get to the meeting. I don't know if Russ has anything he wants to bring up to the council.
Just a reminder that we're meeting next Wednesday,
Next Wednesday.
6 p.m. here in council chambers. Thanks.
Conservation Commission met while I was out of state. I believe, I don't know if I spoke to this last time or not, but there hasn't been any activity since then. Ross Belanger from the farm on Ferry Road had spoken with the Conservation Commission about deer destroying his crops. I think I already brought that up last time, but there hasn't been any meeting since. Parks and Rec.
That's me. I was not able to attend the meeting, but I did actually speak to Mark. Just touch base on a couple items. They are still reviewing some of the items that we'll be hearing about soon about the idea of redoing their charter rules as it was written a long time ago. Talked about the idea of just not having as many volunteers show up for meetings, and the idea of making it going from a 7 to a 5-person committee so they can sometimes get more people there to actually to be able to vote. And I did ask them, and I know the chair had actually asked about it last time about the idea of some of the people that had applied for some of the committees to actually, if they had been attending meetings. Mark actually did mention that both those people that had put applications in for the committee had gone to a couple meetings, and I asked him to actually send a letter of recommendation to our chair and to town managers so we can move forward with those if he felt they're adequate. So, as I told him, it's really hard to complain about no volunteers if we're not pulling in volunteers that are signing up, right? So, we'll see how that plays out. And they're still working along, and he said at some point in time that, their programs are growing. So, I mean, I think he's going to be looking to council to actually help support and maybe, try to figure out how we work as a community to actually better serve these programs and get support on all ends from the school and from the community, and just a lot of things happening, and the idea of actually being active in our youth group and is really important. So,
Very good. County Budget Committee.
I have not had a chance to get over there to their meetings. Have you?
Yeah, I have.
Okay,
Actually,
awesome.
Mark. I went to the budget meeting last week, and actually the tail end of the commissioners' meeting was more productive than the budget committee, because that basically was just when we're going to meet next. So there wasn't a whole lot to it. I actually got tied up with a couple of the commissioners, and when I went over to the other courtroom for the budget committee meeting, they were leaving. So it was kind of short and sweet. But they did have a meeting scheduled. This next meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night, and I will be attending that meeting. But I did have some pretty in-depth discussion with a couple of commissioners regarding the issue with Route 4. But more to come on that. Library Governing Board.
On October 13th at 4 p.m., Marianne O'Connor will be doing a Lisbon Halloween story at the library. The Friends of the Lisbon Library meet at the Lisbon Methodist Church the third Wednesday of every month, so it's October 18th this month at 6 p.m. Senior Fire Safety with Chief LeClaire will be October 23rd at 2 p.m. at the library. And the Halloween party and parade this year has been so popular that they're requiring registration because they just want to make sure they have enough for everybody attending. And that's at 3:30 on October 27th. And for those interested, the library puts out a very good email every week, so you can kind of keep track of what's going on. And I think it's really interesting that they have collaborated a lot with the Lisbon Art Collective. And matter of fact, they had something tonight on digital photography. So that will be a continuing effort along with children's programming that has to do with art. So that's the library.
Thank you for that in-depth report. Water Commission.
I think probably some of you are aware that Blue Ox is making a concentrated effort to expand their business. And I just wanted to say that I was witness to some action on the part of the water department and the water commissioners and the superintendent. And I am very impressed with the way that some very difficult situations were overcome. And particularly Chuck worked with the owner of Blue Ox in much further than he had to make it an equitable and fair situation for him. So kudos to them and to him.
Thank you. Finance Committee.
We have not had a meeting. Do we know if we have a forum yet? Enough members?
I think we're still
Finance?
short one.
Still short one.
I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to double check
Okay.
the
All right.
list.
Thank you.
Next item.
Town Manager's Report.
Okay, good evening. So
Good
I'm
evening.
reporting out for the town manager. I am not the town manager.
You are now.
So the town manager did plan to join remotely, as we saw. He apologizes for the technical difficulties. Actually, we apologize for that. He's at the ICMA conference this week. He noted that he got to see 1.5 million bats fly out from under a bridge, which sounds really interesting. He's been busy connecting with peers. He's taken a tour of the Austin Codes office, which was impressive, and he's excited to return and share what he's learned. On September 21st, the town manager and I met with Lisbon Emergency, the Bowdoin Selectmen, our council, and Bowdoinham's Fire Chief to discuss regionalization. We went over the yearly report and statistics, a general review of the second draft bylaws, and general discussion to start the business plan. And we'll be working with council on the next steps. He notes that we've received the final draft of our public safety study. And as a recap of the timeline, the background is on March 1st, 2022, the council outlined objectives for the public safety building, ranging from creating a public safety committee to determining the buildings designed by 2026. On May 3rd, 2022, the council approved option number 2 for a public safety building study by Port City at a cost of $38,410, which focused on the town's fire and police department's infrastructure needs. On July 12th, 2022, updates on the feasibility analysis for a public safety building by Port City were discussed. On January 3rd, 2023, further discussions on the progress of Port City's assessment for the public safety building took place. And on July 11th, 2023, Port City presented their recommendations supporting the establishment of a public safety building. He is excited to share the report with the public and council and to discuss next steps. And lastly, he apologizes for throwing me in the deep end tonight. However, I'm happy to be here. And we will be working on developing an SOP for Zoom meetings in the future. And that does conclude his report.
Thank you.
Well done.
Maybe I shouldn't be in charge of that part.
What do you have for us? Anything?
Oh goodness, I wasn't prepared for that, but I just want to let you know that my first 2 weeks, so this starts my third week, but the first 2 weeks were amazing. I'm so happy to be here.
Nice.
Really good choice, and everybody's phenomenal. So just thanks for welcoming me, and I'm sure I'll have more to report later on.
Good.
And thank you, because I know that even at the public safety meeting that we had for the Lisbon emergency, you actually volunteered to go. And it's actually great to see people that really want to get deep in and get involved and help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
We have no appointments, so the next item is council communications.
Any counselors wish to communicate?
Only one. I see black pavement on Main Street a little bit, so progress is happening.
Progress.
I believe there's going to be hot top all the way up through before the end of the year, but not completed, but there is progress, so all in time. If we just had a few more weeks like this, we'd be all set, right? But
I especially like the night
night work,
work.
which is kind of right by your place, right?
As long as it gets it done.
Absolutely.
I did attend a retirement gathering for retiring Sergeant St. Pierre from the excuse me, police department at the Left Hand Club Sunday, which was very nice to see some old fogies in there that I used to work with. But it was nice, and he was surprised.
Nice.
Which when you turn into Wag Road, I don't know where you think you're going. And pretty much, no, okay, we're going to the Left Hand Club, because that's pretty much it. But
Surprise over.
But it was nice. Anything else? Next item.
Audience participation and response for new items. At this time, those in the audience who wish to speak may approach the lectern to address items or issues not on the agenda. Slow.
Ross Cunningham, Economic Development Director again. Just a couple quick things I wanted to point out, some upcoming events. The next Tuesday, I'd like to formally invite you folks to the Drinks with Neighbors event, which is where we bring the Lewiston Auburn Chamber and the Bath Brunswick Chamber together in Lisbon for a social event from 5 to 7 on Tuesday evening. Generally business leaders, it will be at Olive Pit Brewing on Main Street. Thank you for hosting. It will have food from Flux and live music, so feel free to come out and join and meet business leaders from both regions and from Lisbon. On Friday the 13th, there will be a ribbon cutting for Lisbon Artworks, which I'm thrilled to see finally get to a storefront. So this is the entrepreneurship grant from the Maine Downtown Center and the Maine Community Foundation, and we're funding that for up to a year to get this group off the ground. They've done great work as a nonprofit already, and to see their store come open is really exciting in the Eastcraft spot. So that's a great turnover for that. Elsewise, over the month, we have on the 14th, there's an art walk on Main Street. Starts at noon, goes to about 7 at night, or 5 at night.
Art walk ends at 5, and then we have an Oktoberfest German band from 6 to 9.
At Olive Pit. That's wonderful. The 21st, there's a 5K down at the Warumbo waterfront running along the walking trail. It's just going to be a fantastic event. And on the 28th, Saturday, is the annual Harvest Festival. So a lot of great things happening in October. I also want to take a quick minute to recognize Councilor LaRochelle. For those of you who have seen the beautiful green grass that's growing down there on the waterfront, I do think that Councilor LaRochelle at this point could take over the water department based on all the work he's done getting sprinklers out there and moving them around at all hours of the evening and morning to make it grow, and it's looking very, very nice. So I'm very happy with that. So thank you to you for that. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Next item.
Adjournment.
So moved. Second. All in favor?
Ross.
Order passed.
We're adjourned. We are adjourned.
With that gavel.
Yeah.
My big task of the night.
I'm not going to use a Sharpie. I seem to have lost my other pen.
Correct.